On the 7th day after my death, a minor palace maid secretly burned paper offerings for me at night and inadvertently disturbed His Imperial Majesty. Zhao Heng irritably kicked the eunuch beside him and angrily said, "You can't even handle something this small. Where is the Empress? Bring her here to see me." No sooner had he spoken than he suddenly remembered that it was he who had personally drafted the edict deposing me. Once young husband and wife, once the closest of kin, we had grown utterly estranged. In the end, no one even dared bring him the news of my death reborn. Zhao Heng proposed to me. I slowly withdrew my wrist, looked at him coldly, and enunciated each word. "This servant and your highness have no future, and there will be no later. In this life, I will not contend. Nor do I wish to live that kind of life again." 01 Lately the Crown Prince Zhao Heng has been plagued by nightmares. The Eastern Palace fires burn through the night. Palace servants whisper that His Highness awoke startled last night. Though no one knows what he dreamed of, his face turned as white as paper and he even vomited blood without stopping. I originally only wanted to leave the palace as soon as possible, but upon hearing this I was momentarily stunned. Rain pattered under the eaves, muffling footsteps, and Zhao Heng stood just outside the corridor. He was exceedingly handsome, with sharply defined brows and slightly cold eye corners. At court banquets, noble girls would steal glances at him through beaded curtains and blush instantly. I bowed my head in greeting. He looked at me and after a long while spoke. "I sent for you 3 times, Miss Center, but you did not come." The palace attendant kneeling by his side lowered his head in fear. I replied calmly, "This servant has been unwell recently." He stared at me and sneered, "I rather think you've been avoiding me." I remained silent. Zhao Heng rubbed his temple wearily. "It's strange, I've been dreaming a lot lately." The blue stone was darkened by rain and held a thin sheen of water, reflecting the faint bluish-gray and pallor beneath his eyes. In the dream there is a woman drenched by rain who vomits blood, yet I can't make out her face. My breath grew shallow and my fingertips bit into my palm. His court boots stood in the lamplight, gold threads on them dotted with rain droplets that had not yet blurred. I looked at that streak of gold that was not a dream, but something I had experienced many years ago. 02 In my previous life, in the 10th year since I became Empress, the Yarrow family's power dominated the court. Consort Yarrow grew ever more favored, her retinue increasingly grand, and she could even sit on equal footing with me at palace banquets. People in the palace said Consort Yarrow enjoyed immense imperial favor. The little imperial prince she bore was clever and lively, and whenever His Majesty went over he would hold the child for a long time and was loath to set him down even when reviewing memorials. By then my Honga was already crown prince. I tried every means to contend with the Yarrow family, but in just a few years old ministers of the Eastern Palace were successively demoted. The Center family was framed by the Yarrow clan, and the whole clan was imprisoned. On that day, rain lashed down. I had removed my hairpin to wait for punishment and knelt outside the hall for 2 hours before Zhao Heng finally agreed to see me. He saw me soaked through, weak, and collapsed to the ground, yet his voice remained cool. "Empress, I am not dead yet, and you already wish to take power." I was about to speak when Consort Yarrow suddenly smiled at me. "Your Majesty does not yet know, 2 hours ago, the entire Center family was executed." I stood frozen as rain dripped from my hair onto the ground. Zhao Heng said nothing, his expression indifferent. Consort Yarrow's lips curved in a half-smile. "What a pity. Empress, you've come too late even to see Lord Center for the last time." A mouthful of blood choked out. The hall was brightly lit, and I collapsed at the imperial steps. I forced my head back with all my strength, only to see the hem of his robe drooping and the dragon pattern embroidered in gold thread on his boots. 03 The palace lanterns swayed gently in the wind, their scattered shadows pricking at my eyes. I looked up and smiled lightly at Zhao Heng. "Your Highness has been overworked lately. It's only natural to have many dreams. Besides, dreams are all illusions." Zhao Heng fell silent for a moment, studied me for a long time, his smile icy cold. "Really?" He stepped forward, a faint shadow crossing us. "I thought you would care for me first." Just then, someone came running down the corridor, a young girl in a goose-yellow cloak, a begonia tucked at her temple, her laughter bright and clear. "In this life, She was not yet consort Yao, your highness. Yarrow Tang lifted her face, a blush in her eyes as she looked at Zhao Heng. I broke off a begonia branch, earlier I saw. Your highness glanced twice and thought you liked it. Saying so, she offered the flower in her hand. Zhao Heng lowered his gaze to that begonia, neither taking it nor turning away. No one spoke for a moment. Yarrow Tang pressed her lips together. Uneasy. I just wanted to say a few words to your highness. If my sister is displeased, I will leave at once. She said she would go, but her feet did not move. Zhao Heng was waiting too, likely thinking the center family's daughter proud, yet having been close to him since childhood, seeing this scene should stir some emotion. I watched them and smiled faintly. Whom you wish to speak with is your affair. Whom your highness wishes to listen to is your highness's affair. I have nothing to misunderstand. The smile on Yarrow Tang's face stiffened slightly. Zhao Heng frowned displeased, his gaze fixed tightly on my face. Unfortunately, the man from a past life who would be hurt by siding with someone else is already dead. I lowered my brows and spoke calmly. If your highness has no other matters, this subject will take her leave. Having said that, I turned around. The rain pattered down. Even after walking far away, I could still feel that gaze, heavy with suppressed anger, settling gloomily on me. 04 The next evening, Zhao Heng came to call. There were trunks and chests not yet moved out in the flower hall, and he looked at them for a long time, then asked, "What is this about?" The servants, panic-stricken, dropped to their knees. All around I put down the accounts book and answered, "These are old items returned to your highness." Zhao Heng's usually calm and noble face slowly sank. He frowned at me and said, "Miss Center, do you want to draw a clear boundary with me?" At that moment the inner attendant came in from the doorway, carefully holding a golden cage for a canary. Inside the cage, a snow-white parrot tilted its head, looking around here and there. The attendant smiled obsequiously at me. "Just brought from the south yesterday. It's very talkative." The parrot suddenly chirped crisply. "Your highness likes Miss Center." Zhao Heng looked at me, as if awaiting my reaction. If it were before, I would probably have smiled at him in delight, but I only calmly instructed the steward, "Since His Highness sent it, send this back as well." The courtyard suddenly fell silent. Zhao Heng's gaze turned frighteningly cold. "Center Chiu, you don't even want this." I lifted my head to meet his eyes. "Things from His Highness don't belong here." "Fine," he said, "since you don't want it." As the words fell, the gilt birdcage was overturned with a single heave. The parrot screamed and fled, its wings stained with blood, only able to stagger and flap wildly. Zhao Heng watched it struggle with cold eyes and ordered the trembling crowd, "Get out." He looked at me again, then suddenly stepped forward and seized my wrist, the grip so strong it hurt. His eyes were very dark, his anger deeply repressed. "I don't know what mood you've been in lately, but you better think carefully about who will stand by me in the future and hereafter." Silence spread in all directions. I slowly pulled my wrist out of his palm and called, "Your Highness." Zhao Heng leaned in to listen. I said softly, "I, a minister's daughter, have no future with your highness, nor will there be any hereafter." I once believed him, but what about later? My child is dead, driven to his doom by Zhao Heng's own hand. I can never leave that rainy night of his death. 05 That night in the past life, a violent storm lashed the palace. Rain pounded the glazed tiles of the Jiaofeng Hall, dull and urgent. I sat beneath the lamp and did not move for a long time. A figure stumbled in. Honga fell to his knees, rain dripping from his hairline, his eyes rimmed with blood. "Empress, the emperor has already issued an edict to depose me." I reached out to steady him, but my hand found his shoulders tense as iron, his whole body shaking. "I am not afraid of dying." He lowered his head, resting his forehead against my knee, like a child wronged long ago. "I only fear dying without clarity, with no one to protect me, humiliated in this palace." The rain outside the hall drummed like a drum. I closed my eyes, laid my cool hand on the top of his head, and after a long moment said softly, "If you take this step, you will never be able to turn back." He was silent for a long time, then answered softly, "Honga has grown up." He had just passed his 17th birthday and was no longer the child who slept in my arms crying. I looked down at him and, as in my childhood, reached out and held him in my arms. The armor was cold, cutting into my arm until it ached, but I still held him. Go, I handed him the Empress's seal and ribbon. Since there's no way back, don't look behind you. Honga shuddered violently, knelt again, and kowtowed heavily. Before he left, I said to him, whether you succeed or fail, Mother will be here waiting for you. Span 06. When the sky grew dim, the rain stopped. Blood outside the palace gate had been washed away by the rain, winding down the jade steps in thin streams. I saw Honga outside the Chengming gate. He lay on the cold jade steps, his armor split open, a large patch of blood on his chest darkened by the rain. The imperial guards around gave way. No one stopped me. I carried a lantern, the flame trembling in the wind, lighting that young face so pale it was almost translucent. He was the child I bore after 10 months of pregnancy. His nose and lips resembled Zhao Heng, but his brows and eyes were like mine. Now he lay there motionless, his dark pupils dim and lifeless, staring toward the Jiaofang hall, unwilling to close his eyes in death. My knees went weak and I knelt beside him. The ground was cold and wet. I felt nothing. I lifted my hand and smoothed his disheveled hair little by little. When Honga was small he hated having his hair combed, saying my hands were heavy. When he grew older he became shy and refused to let me tie his hair for him. This time, no matter how I touched him, he would not move. Someone stepped forward and said in a low voice, Your Grace, His Majesty has issued a decree. I had never heard of such a thing and pulled Honga into my arms. The person paused for a moment. Empress Center, move out of the Jiaofang Palace and be demoted to a commoner. 13 characters. This edict is very short. I slowly lift my head and look up at the high platform. Zhao Heng is standing right there. He didn't come closer. His gaze crashed straight into mine. After the rain, the daylight was a ghastly white. His dragon robe trailed on the ground. His crown was set properly, still the very image of an emperor above all. This is the man who has been married to me for 20 years. 07. Consort Yarrow stood beside Zhao Heng, cradling the little prince in her arms. She had eyes full of thrill of getting what she wanted. The little prince looked at the blood all over the ground and the remains in my arms. He timidly called out, Father Emperor, our child died here. Zhao Heng, however, gently soothed the favored consortant. Their young son, when pain reaches its extreme, no tears can fall. I slowly set Honga down, and my fingertips brushed the sword at his side. It was bestowed by Zhao Heng when he turned 10 now. The sword is stained with his blood. In the next instant, I suddenly draw the sword. Consort Yarrow, soft and delicate, throws herself into Zhao Heng's arms. The little prince is so frightened that he bursts into tears. Empress, Zhao Heng shouted to stop in anger. I walked onto the high platform, my sword hand trembling. His voice was as cold as ice. Your Majesty, the crime of treason shall be punishable by extermination of your entire clan. Should you dare to act rashly again, even if I wish to retain you, I shall be unable to do so. I smiled without the slightest concern. Haven't you already wiped out the entire Center family? For the first time in 20 years, his pupils constricted, his expression both astonished and pained. Empress Yarrow hid behind the imperial guards, hysterically cried out, Your Majesty, she's mad, quickly have someone seize her. Before the words had fallen, I suddenly raised my hand and hurled my long sword. The dragon robe soon soaked through with dark blood. The blood of an emperor is not necessarily any different from anyone else's. Dozens of imperial guards' blades came slashing toward me. Zhao Heng clutched his wound and barked sharply, Don't hurt her. The next moment, an arrow buried itself in my shoulder. The sword in hand clanged and fell to the ground, falling from the high platform. One last glance, concubine Yarrow held the bowstring. Defiant hatred burned in her eyes. 08. In this life, that white parrot fluttered its wings and fell at my feet. I crouched down and gathered it into my palms. Zhao Heng's gaze was so dark it was terrifying. She swept away in a flourish. I want to see who you can marry in the future. That night, the East Palace again received several imperial physicians in succession. It is said the prince's nightmare struck again, waking him to clutch at his chest, as if someone stabbed me with a sword in a dream. I said nothing in response and went to Mother's room. I only said that last night I dreamed of a blood glow before the Buddha, always feeling that it was inauspicious. and I wanted to go to Fuchen Temple to stay for a few days. To seek a safety talisman, Mother was somewhat hesitant. I steered clear of Zhao Heng as much as possible, and she knew it. Hearing me say this, she nodded slightly. Go, then, Bower, all your mother wants is for you to be happy. In my previous life, the entire center family was executed, and I was granted a pot of poisoned wine. Nanny said that when Mother drank it down, she didn't shed any tears, she only gave some reluctant, final instructions. Your ladyship is afraid of the dark. At night, don't forget to light a few more lamps. Thinking of this, I buried my head in Mother's arms, and my tears fell like rain. Incense curls through the main hall of Fuchen Temple. The gilded Buddha statue lowers its eyes, compassionately yet coldly gazing down upon all living beings. I kneel on the meditation cushion and briefly close my eyes. If gods and Buddhas truly exist, then let me pray in this life to protect my center family's peace, and to keep myself from repeating the same mistakes. When I rose, my sleeve accidentally knocked a scripture scroll to the floor. The scroll rolled down the steps and came to a stop right before a pair of black-soled boots. I froze for a moment and looked up. No idea when a person stood outside the main hall. The person was tall, with refined features and sharp brows. Morning light spilled in from behind him, washing him in a cold, frosty glow. He lowered his eyes to the scripture on the ground, bending to pick it up. The wind rustles outside the hall, banners flutter gently. His pale blue hairband is also lifted. A tear slides down from my eye. 09 Shathat room diverged in thought. I recognized him. Shu Jie. In his previous life, he was the youngest cabinet minister at court, and later served as Honga's grand tutor for 10 years. Upright and incorruptible, calm and reserved, his whole face was so well defined it bordered on severe. My impression of him was nothing more than that. Until that year, I followed Zhao Heng to the Jiangnan imperial residence. No one expected that an assassin would slip into the palace banquet. Steel flashed suddenly, and the crowd screamed and scattered in panic. Zhao Heng immediately shielded consort Yarrow at his side. A long sword sliced through the air. I didn't even have time to react before a sweep of crimson official robes flashed before my eyes. That well-proportioned hand, tendons standing out, clamped down hard on the blade. Blood instantly welled from between his fingers, pattering down, soaking through the official robes. The sword tip hovered before my brow another half-inch and I'd be done for. When I came to, the palace attendants were shielding me as I retreated to Zhao Heng's side. Zhao Heng, lost and found. Again, like grips my wrist and pulls me into his arms. I am still shaken, trembling all over Zhao Heng's shoulder. I suddenly see Shu Jie slowly loosen his grip on that sword. The flesh of his right palm is mangled, the wound so deep the bone shows, and blood has soaked the cuff of his official robe to a dark stain. His brows and eyes were lowered, always observing proper decorum, and he never glanced at me more than once. It was as if the person who saved me earlier was not him. Soon after, I went to the study. Outside the window the spring rain had just eased. Shu Jie was seated at the desk teaching Honga. His right hand was wrapped in thick white bandages. His left hand held the brush, though his strokes were slow. I placed the gift on the desk and thanked him for saving my life. His expression was gentle and distant. He did not look up. Your Majesty, it does no harm for me to hold the brush in my left hand. After that, I sent the imperial physicians to the Shu residence many times, but I never saw Shu Jie write with his right hand again. Many people regretted it. After all, his calligraphy and paintings were worth a fortune in the capital. Later, someone in court used this as an excuse to remove him from the post of grand tutor. He never defended himself. He said it was to save me. At that time, as Empress, I had to avoid any appearance of impropriety with ministers, and my relationship with Zhao Heng had long been estranged. If I had spoken up, it would have harmed him. I never expected that many years later, when I saw him again, I would cry because of it. Shu Jie picked up the sutra with his left hand. I did not immediately take it. Our eyes met. The sutra the monk had just. I'm not quite versed in it. Sir Shu, could you take a look for me? He glanced at me. The look was faint, yet it seemed to see straight through me. After the imperial examination in my previous life, there had been an incident in the capital. A student outside the Gongyuan accused fraud, shouting hoarsely that his exam paper had been swapped and his rank usurped. At first people thought him mad, until he dashed his head against a stone lion and died. In the end the Yarrow family pinned the blame on an inconsequential Ministry of Rights clerk and the matter was brushed aside. In this life, I found that student ahead of time. He bit his finger and wrote his accusation. When he handed it over his hands trembled so much he could barely hold it. Miss, I do not seek success in the exams. Each word was ground out of him, eyes reddened. I only want my innocence. Today I came to deliver that deposition to Shu Jie. In my previous life I had seen him stand in court, upright in office. Even when he angered Zhao Heng repeatedly, he would not back down, like green bamboo. Unchangeable in its integrity, the incense smoke drifted past his profile. Shu Jie stood there, robe neat, features severe. His long fingers turned the sutra pages until they stopped on that page. His gaze was calm, as if reading the most ordinary of texts. After a long while he spoke. This sutra is not difficult. I breathed a sigh of relief, raised my eyes, and smiled at him. I did not expect you would come to the temple to discuss sutras with someone. A smile froze on my lips, turning my head. Zhao Heng stood outside the hall, his brow and eyes sharp, his dark robes no less imposing. I kept my expression composed and slipped the scroll back into my sleeve. Minister Shu has free time today. Zhao Heng's gaze was keen as it landed on Shu Jie. I bowed slightly. If your highness has come to worship, I will not disturb you. Suddenly Zhao Heng reached out and pulled the scroll from my sleeve. If we're discussing the sutra, let me have a look as well. My heart clenched. I moved to snatch it back. But he caught my wrist in one hand. What are you in such a hurry for? His eyes pinned me. The corners of his mouth lifted faintly. Or could it be that there's something inside you don't want me to see? Zhao Heng's smile was faint as he opened the scroll. Your Highness, Shu Jie spoke calmly, lifting his eyes with an air of integrity and ease. This is a Buddhist hall. Your Highness behaving so is rather impudent. Besides, I have already examined it. There is nothing difficult to understand. Zhao Heng said nothing. His fingertip still rested on that page of the scroll but he did not move it further. I knew he was weighing things. Sure enough, he let out a soft laugh. You are thorough, Minister Shu. That page, after all, was not turned. He closed the scroll at a leisurely pace, as if he had only glanced casually. He looked up at the burned remnants of incense on the table. His gaze toward me had softened, even showing a faint pleasure. You actually care about my nightmares. There was a tone of comprehension in his voice. Since you're praying for me, stay a few more days. At that moment, Yarrow Tang stepped over the threshold, lifting her skirt, and walked straight to Zhao Heng's side, her eyes fixed directly on me. I didn't expect sister had arrived first. Zhao Heng's tone seemed reproachful, but in fact indulgent. Your body is weak. You need not come in person to pray for the orphan. She smiled at me with upturned lips. I originally thought elder sister had high standards and would disdain such supplications to gods and Buddhas. Shu Jie suddenly closed the sutra roll in his hands. The motion was not forceful. He looked up at Yarrow Tang. His tone held not an edge. His expression remained calm. He said, the gods and Buddhas above, Miss Yao. Your words are too irreverent. Yarrow Tang's smile faltered slightly. I paid it no mind. I knelt again before the Buddha. Incense flickered, crumbling into ash. Behind me Zhao Heng stared, a faint smile in his gaze. I closed my eyes and pressed my hands together. Reborn in this life. I only wish that karma will be served, and that those who deserve death will not be spared. Heavy rain in the mountains soaked me as I stepped out. My sleeves picked up dampness. The monk who was to fetch the umbrella had not yet returned. At the end of the corridor roof, Shu Jie stood behind the curtain of rain. His green robe was spotless, the downpour doing nothing to make him look disheveled. He handed me the umbrella. On the plain-surfaced umbrella with bamboo ribs, the rain had gathered into a thin shimmer of water. The mountain rain is coming hard. Take this umbrella. Seeing that he had only this one umbrella, I raised my hand and opened it, and the light softened with it. So I smiled at him. Then let's go together. Shu Jie was stunned for a moment, long lashes lowering as he quickly shifted his gaze toward that curtain of rain. Yet his hand naturally took the umbrella and held it steady over my head. The stone steps were slick with rain, and he walked very slowly. The blue robe was soaked by the rain, the damp spreading down from the shoulders. When he reached the meditation room, Shu Jie drew the umbrella in slightly, his clear as warm and bright. "Please be at ease regarding what I entrusted to you just now." He said nothing more and turned to walk into the rain. My steps were inexplicably light as I set foot on the corridor, but the smile at the corners of my lips suddenly vanished without a trace. Zhao Heng's robes were soaked through, and his wet black hair clung to the side of his face. He stood entirely in the shadows, his complexion so pale it was almost translucent, like a water ghost crawling out of a deep pool, gloomily regarding me with a cold face. "You're back." The young eunuch beside him dropped to his knees with a thud, his voice trembling. "Your Highness saw it raining and insisted I leave the umbrella for the lady, but unfortunately, she had already left." Zhao Heng impatiently raised his hand to dismiss him. He stepped forward, closing in with damp mist swirling around him. I met his gaze in silence. That moment of silence was like a spark falling into scalding oil. Zhao Heng was so furious he laughed. The smile was faint, and in his dark eyes, emotions surged. The torrential rain became mere accompaniment. His voice was low and slow, like a viper hissing out its tongue. "What, have you taken a fancy to Shu Jie?" Zhao Heng sneered. "The whole court knows he holds himself above others and shuns the company of women." I suddenly remembered that in my past life, when Zhao Heng summoned Shu Jie, he once impulsively wanted to betroth him to a noble lady. Shu Jie declined and said came from humble origins and didn't want to ruin a fine lady. Because of this, Zhao Heng was faintly displeased and said he was looking down his nose at everyone. I was at the time standing outside the waterside pavilion. At that time, dusk in the palace was deep, and the surface of the lotus pond was as dark as ink. Shu Jie tilted his head to look at that pool of dusky water. The palace lanterns swayed lightly in the wind, casting reflections in the lotus pond that rippled with shimmering glints. His long lashes lowered, his tone was flat, yet tinged with bitterness. "Your Majesty, I have already found my place." Zhao Heng smiled upon hearing this. "Lord Shu also has things he desires but cannot obtain. Thus this matter was dropped later, until I died." Shu Jie remained unmarried for his entire life. 13 In the shadow of the corridor, Zhao Heng saw me lose focus. The coldness in his eyes gradually surging up and suddenly gripping my jaw, forcing me to raise my eyes. "Are you going to hold a grudge all alone to this extent just for him?" When I looked at Zhao Heng, my gaze was calm and untroubled, long devoid of the youthful admiration I once felt. This moment pierced him. The hand on his jaw suddenly clenched. I reached out indifferently and pushed aside his wrist bone. "None of anyone else's business." Zhao Heng refused to let go, his knuckles white from the strain. "Center Chiu." Each syllable was slow and clear, wrapped in the oppressive weight of a storm about to break. "Even if I do not marry you, no one else will." I lifted my head. It felt as if a fire had been lit deep in my chest, slowly starting to burn in his dark pupils. My eyes, brimming with hatred, were reflected. This hatred is too full, too heavy, pressing until my eyes ache, with faint bloodshot threads like spreading cracks. "Your Highness, just try, let's see, in this lifetime, whether I marry you or not." Zhao Heng suddenly let go, his chest heaving violently. He had been plagued by nightmares recently, and his complexion was much worse than before. Now he stood at the boundary between the lamplight and the curtain of rain, deep shadows clouding his brows and eyes, his thin lips pale, and he even turned his head to cough a few times. The cough came on both sudden and heavy. He raised a hand to cover his mouth, but a sharp streak of glaring red appeared between his fingers and slowly seeped out. The young eunuch keeping watch in the distance cried out in shock. "Your Highness." Zhao Heng raised his hand and barked a harsh order to stop, though his voice was already hoarse beyond recognition. "Get lost." He refused to let anyone approach, still fixing his gaze on me, as if trying to find panic or concern on my face. Even just a trace of our former feelings would have sufficed. But I merely stood where I was, my expression indifferent. Not even my eyelashes trembled. This appearance is actually more humiliating to him than coughing up blood. Zhao Heng slowly straightened up and raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his lips. As his sleeve fell, It revealed a hint of a thin yet strained wrist bone. "All right," he looked at me and said slowly, "Center Chio, you're really something." 14. The rain gradually stopped this night. The mountain temple's bell tolled heavily, candle flames wavered without cease, and the room was filled with ragged, splintered light and shadow. I slept until midnight and suddenly caught the smell of something burnt. At first it was just a wisp, very faint, like a curtain somewhere had caught fire from a lamp flame. A red glow immediately rose behind the papered window, a few crackling sounds, and tongues of flame shot up in an instant. Outside it was eerily quiet. No monks ran about shouting, only the wind feeding the fire, whooshing into the window. My heart suddenly sank. I pushed the door but it didn't budge. Someone had locked it. Thick smoke was already seeping in, stinging my throat. I stepped back 2 paces, grabbed the copper lamp on the table and smashed it hard against the window lattice. The wooden window split open a crack, and a blast of fire burst into view, illuminating the slender figure on the corridor below. Yarrow Tang stood in a cloak in the rain-washed night, a ghostly light in her eyes. Through the wall of flames, she looked at me through the broken window, a faint smile at her lips. "Sister, aren't you the one who prays to gods and Buddhas? Why aren't you praying tonight?" I looked at her without speaking. The smoke grew thicker, the heat hit my face, and the beams of the house groaned under the strain. Yarrow Tang, probably thinking I couldn't escape, stepped closer 2 slow paces, lifting her skirt to see me burn to death with her own eyes. "It's good if you die." Her eyes held triumph, but her voice remained soft. "Once you're gone, His Highness will slowly forget you." The next moment I hurled myself against the searing window lattice from the inside, caught off guard. Yarrow Tang instinctively tried to retreat, but I grabbed her wrist and yanked her fiercely toward me. She screamed, the cloak was licked by flames, and she struggled in panic. "Center Chio, you're mad." With all my strength I shoved her toward the burning window. The flames leaped up, catching half her face and temple. She gave a piercing, agonized scream and, covering her face, fell into the collapsed wooden frame, her jewels scattering on the floor. The old woman she had brought finally snapped out of it and, forgetting me, cried and dashed forward to rescue her. I staggered and rushed for the exit. The smoke billowed, cutting into my lungs like swallowing knives, my chest burning. A few steps later, the beam behind me crashed down, and the sea of fire swept in from behind. I grabbed a corridor post. My vision went dim in waves, and all I could hear was wind, fire, and heart-rending cries. A little further on my legs gave out and I tumbled down. 15. Someone scooped me up in the dusk. The embrace was careful, the robe carrying a faint smell of perfume used to weigh down water. He called my name again and again. I wanted to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt heavier than 1,000 catties. Consciousness drifted. I saw a small light, a tiny lamp, like a bean, illuminating a dark corner of the palace. Only when I drew closer did I see it wasn't a lamp. The little palace maid knelt there, her fingers red from the cold, cautiously dropping joss paper into a brazier. "Lady Center, this servant has no skill, can only secretly burn some paper." I stood there stunned. This was the 7th day after my death in my past life. The wind drove snow toward the brazier. The maid hastily reached out to shield it and shivered as ash singed her. Just then, hurried footsteps came from afar, eunuchs flocking around a figure in bright yellow. "Who goes there?" The palace lights came up. I was like a wisp of unnoticed ghost. Zhao Heng was probably drunk, red veins showing in his eyes, his whole bearing taut with an inexplicable irritability and fatigue. He saw the maid and the brazier and felt ill-omened. His brows knitted, and he lifted his foot to kick at a eunuch's knee. "You can't even handle such a small thing properly. Where is the Empress? Bring her here to see me." At his words, the hall fell deathly silent. The little maid somehow found strength to burst past the eunuch and threw herself before him. "Your Majesty, the Empress passed away long ago." The ash left in the brazier was whipped up by wind and snow. Half-burnt joss paper spun down into the snow and within moments stuck together into a greyish clump of mud. Zhao Heng stood there for a long time before speaking very slowly, very slowly. "What did you say? Who is dead?" The little maid was all tears, her forehead striking the ground with loud knocks. "Lady Center died 7 days ago. This servant was afraid she'd be cold and alone underground, as suffocating, heavy breathing, too coarse to sound like a living person's. The veins on the back of Zhao Heng's hand stood out. He turned to the kneeling palace attendants, as if something were burning along his bones up into his eyes, flushing them scarlet. "She's been dead 7 days, and you dared hide it from me." The old eunuch suddenly kowtowed, his voice shrill and altered in tone. "Your Majesty, spare us. We wouldn't dare, we truly would not dare." It was Consort Yarrow ordered that the former Empress's funeral be kept simple, not to disturb the imperial presence. Zhao Heng suddenly spun with a metallic ring of steel. He drew his sword. The eunuchs were petrified. I hovered behind Zhao Heng. Following his every step forward, Zhao Heng kicked open the main hall doors. Consort Yarrow lay slumped on the couch, leisurely having a maid rub her feet. "Your Majesty." Zhao Heng bore wind and snow on him, the corners of his eyes bloodshot, his pupils black and menacing. The sword hung at an angle, the blade under the lamp catching a cold gleam as if thirsting for blood. The smile was thin, like frost on a blade. "She is dead." Consort Yarrow steadied herself, and when she looked at him again her eyes were brimming with tears. "The Emperor is busy with state affairs. I feared disturbing His Majesty, so I intended to have the palace notify him in a few days. I only meant well. In the next moment, Zhao Heng suddenly raised his hand. The sword's edge swept past the consort's temple, cutting off a gold hairpin which clattered to the ground, and several strands of black hair were severed and fell. Consort Yarrow screamed, her face drained of color as she collapsed to the floor, so stunned she forgot even to cry. Zhao Heng's gaze was like looking at a corpse. "You should count yourself lucky that your surname is Yarrow." He spoke slowly, his voice hoarse. "Be glad that I cannot kill you now." Zhao Heng turned and left, drops of blood falling from his palm onto the snow. I sneered. "So this is what happened after I died in my previous life. Of course I don't believe Zhao Heng would kill Yarrowtang if the noble consort is killed tonight. The court will be in an uproar tomorrow. He is still just as hypocritical and cold-hearted." The whole hall of lamps swayed before my eyes and swayed, and Consort Yarrow's crying grew vague, elongated, and intermittent. In the next moment, the dream collapsed with a thunderous crash. 16. When I woke up I learned that it was Xu Jie who pulled me out of the fire that night. Later Zhao Heng arrived with the imperial physician and stayed by my side all night. In just these few days, Lord Xu together with the censorate submitted memorials. The capital was in a panic, the Yarrow household collapsed, and the implications were far-reaching. Day of the incident, Yarrowtang failed to ruin me. After the burn, the entire household was seized by imperial decree, and not even a doctor could be found. It is said I burned so badly I went insane, my appearance completely ruined, and I was exiled along with the Yarrow family's women. Therefore, the prince's faction is now in constant danger. The Center family, having withdrawn early and being loyal, virtuous, and incorruptible, ultimately survived. However, compared to the stormy court, the rumors that fall on me come faster. They say I am infatuated with the prince, willingly go to the dust-dispelling temple to pray for him, and that the high fever and coma were also because of the prince that I barely regained my life. After this storm, the Center family's girl will eventually enter the Eastern Palace. My parents silently wiped away tears, and I remained very calm. Zhao Heng's move is nothing more than forcing me to bow down. Anyone who cherishes their honor and fears offending the Eastern Palace, even if they originally intended to wed into the Center family, would now avoid it at all costs. If I want to marry, there is only one place left for me, the Eastern Palace. I lifted my eyes and looked out the window. Summer was just beginning to settle in the courtyard, a few jujube blossoms on the branches already showing a tinge of red. When the wind blew, the leaves rustled softly. In my past life I was always trapped by these things: reputation, virtue, rank, each one like a rope, binding a person tightly, until in the end I even paid with my life. Just then, Mother hurried in, her face alight with joy. "Bauer, a guest has come to the front yard." The entry hall was pale with daylight. When I walked in, Xu Jieching's plain, silver-gray robe and the neatly tied jade crown set off his face, upright and refined. He has always been poised and few words, but now he stood there, and even his brows and eyes carried a rare tension, as if he had never done anything so impulsive in his life. "I came today because I wished to seek a betrothal." The hall fell silent, and even the sound of the wind outside brushing the flowers was clear enough to hear. I looked at him and for a moment could not find the words. There was none of a young man's impetuous, burning passion on his face. He merely sat there, his robes neat, his features upright, his expression almost solemn, and precisely because of that, my chest felt even hotter. He continued, "There are many rumors outside, all because the young lady and I have dealings at the temple, though my conscience is clear, I cannot remain unmoved. Besides," Shujie paused there, his Adam's apple rolling gently, as if that sentence was not easy to bring out. "Moreover, I have long harbored this intention in my heart." I stood there blankly, watching him. The hall was incredibly quiet. Shujie lowered his eyes, his voice still steady, but a touch lower than before. "I know it seems like I'm taking advantage of the moment, and I know the young lady's current predicament is awkward, and she may not be willing to trust anything sincere again. I can only promise this: if you are willing to marry, I will take you as my legitimate wife. For the rest of my life, I will not take a secondary wife. I will not keep an outsider. I will not allow you to suffer any humiliation, if you do not wish to. What was said today will be as though I had never spoken. I will do my best to quell rumors outside, so that Center family will not be burdened by them." When he finished speaking, he bowed deeply to me. The bow was extremely solemn. His sleeve fell back, revealing the old wound on his right hand. The wound ran deep, traversing horizontally across the metacarpal, the scar faintly white. I had seen it in a past life, a scar that should not have appeared in this life. I felt a sudden jolt in my heart and was about to ask him. Just at that moment, urgent footsteps suddenly came from outside, and the servant, trembling, tried to block them. "Your Highness, you must not." In the next moment, the door curtain was swept aside by someone. Zhao Heng stood at the doorway. 17. He had come too suddenly, not even tying his outer robe, his eyes burning with a terrifying red. "Liao, Master Shu, what a bold man you are." Shu Jie's expression remained calm. "I seek to marry Miss Center because I am fond of her. It has nothing to do with your Highness." With these words, the entire hall fell into dead silence. Zhao Heng's expression changed abruptly. He fixed his gaze on Shu Jie, and after a moment, suddenly burst into laughter. Fond of him. The next instant, he walked straight over. "You agreed to him." I smelled a strong medicinal odor. Zhao Heng sounded like he was being driven mad. His voice grew more urgent, and a nearly frantic pain surfaced in his eyes. "Do you know what I just remembered?" He looked at me as if looking at someone who had died and come back to life, been lost and found again, yet could vanish once more at any moment. "I remember everything. You and I shouldn't be like this, Zhao." Without turning his head, ordered the eunuch behind him, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "Go fetch the imperial decree. I will ask Father Emperor to grant the marriage." The eunuch was so frightened that he prostrated himself on the ground, not daring to make a sound. Shu Jie shielded me behind him, his voice gentle. "Your Highness, have you come to seek a marriage, or to force one?" Zhao Heng slowly lifted his eyes. "What's it to you? I haven't even entered the Eastern Palace, yet I'm already tied to him," I said in a clear voice. The color drained from Zhao Heng's face with startling speed, as if someone were drawing his soul out of him inch by inch, as if no matter what he refused to believe that just now that sentence could truly have come from my mouth. "Heger's Datm," as if blood surged in his throat, his voice unbearably hoarse. "Center Chiu." I didn't answer him, only said calmly, "If your Highness has come to make a scene today, then forgive me for not seeing you out." The doorway curtain was whipped up by the wind and fell heavily again. Shadows of the day swayed outside, casting a single strip of WN pale light inside. Shu Jie turned around. I lifted my eyes to look at him and asked softly, "Does what you just said, Sir Shu, still stand?" He looked at me, his voice low and clear. "It counts?" I asked again. "If after today the Eastern Palace blames you, the court voices its objections, and the officials before the throne censure you, all of it falls on you, does that still count?" Shu Jie's expression did not change. "It still counts." Outside the hall the wind passed through the courtyard trees. A few juju blossoms rustled down, I looked at those few tiny petals. Many years ago I too believed such promises. Back then I was young and actually thought the word promise could withstand the wavering of the human heart, withstand wealth and power, withstand an emperor's coldness. Now when I hear him say such things again, my heart first tightens with a little ache, and then only a faint warmth. I slowly lifted my head. All right. Then I'll wait for you to come marry me. Shu Jie's eyelashes fluttered slightly. Such a steady, composed man was, because of my single sentence, shaken in his gaze. Zhao Heng had recently fallen from favor, with the Yarrow family ruined and former Eastern Palace officials successively impeached by the censorate. The emperor was already displeased over the crown prince's nightmares, blood vomiting, and drastic change in temperament, hearing that he still privately associated with several military commanders only deepened his suspicions. The court's atmosphere grew tenser by the day, and everyone could see that the crown prince's position was on shaky ground, so once he calmed down, there was no way he would again plead marriage and risk angering His Majesty. Yet within half a day, an imperial edict arrived. The emperor personally bestowed the marriage papers and selected an auspicious date to unite Shu Center in matrimony. I knew Zhao Heng would not accept this quietly. A man like him, even when driven to the cliff's edge, would only blame others for betraying and forcing him, never admit he had taken the wrong path. Shu Jie came to the manor to deliver the wedding invitation. Mother pulled father away to the outer yard, leaving only him and me sitting across the table in the main hall. The 9th day of next month, that's the date set by the Ministry of Rites together with the Imperial Astronomical Bureau. I took the invitation but did not open it at once. Instead I looked at the hand he had placed on the table. He was used to holding his cup with his left hand, his right hand hanging at his sleeve, and the old scar running across the metacarpal bones was still there, startlingly white. I suddenly asked, "When did Lord Shu get that wound?" Shu Jie looked at me and didn't answer right away. A gust of wind blew in from outside. The bamboo blinds swayed lightly. The light and shadow flickered with them, casting a faint, wavering shade across his brows and eyes. It was a long time before he whispered, "Hadn't your ladyship known all along?" I clenched the wedding certificate in my hand a little tighter. I know why it exists in the previous life. I looked at him, word for word, softly asking, "I only don't know why it still remains in this life." The flower hall was extremely quiet. After a long while, Shu Jie slowly raised his eyes. His gaze was deep, cool and indifferent, like a pool of water that had long been bottomless. "Daughter, I remember, Your Majesty, so do I." This line fell softly, like wind, yet it struck straight into my heart. I stared at him blankly, only speaking after a long while. "When did you remember?" He paused for a moment, his voice very low. "From the first time I could not lift the pen with my right hand, I remembered." My eyes suddenly pricked with tears. In a past life he held the brush with his right hand, filling the capital with fame. In this life he still bears that wound, as if fate had burned it into his bones and blood. And even if reborn, would not easily let him go. I looked at him for a long time without speaking. Shu Jie seemed to see through what I was thinking, his expression still calm. "Your Majesty does not need to be sad," he said. "If I can remember it, it may not be a bad thing." This sentence was spoken very softly, almost gently, yet it still sent a tremor through my heart. I lowered my head, my fingers unconsciously caressing the marriage contract, and after a while, I whispered, "Then what happened in your previous life?" Halfway through the sentence, it suddenly stopped. "In my past life, I bore the burden of me and Honga. I only remember the day he was banished from the capital, the smoke and willows along the BA bridge, the long wind blowing so that the dust on the official road turned pale. I sat in the carriage, peering through half a rolled-up curtain, and saw him in a blue robe astride a horse, his face pale, his brows and eyes colder than before, and more silent, that time. I went to see him off as Empress, using the excuse of going out of the city to bow to the Buddha, stopping far away at the riverbank to take one last look at him. After that, there was no more. I didn't know where he went, nor his ending." Shu Jie looked at me, his gaze pausing slightly, not answering directly. A strange heaviness settled in my heart, and I was about to ask again when someone hurried in, pale-faced. "Your Highness, something happened in the palace." I felt ice cold all over. Unable to say more, and Shu Jie and my father hurried out of the residence 19 at dusk. The wind rustled the bamboo curtains in the corridor, even the flowers and trees in the courtyard swayed. Suddenly there were sounds of fighting outside, and the courtyard gate was kicked open, the torches flared, turning half the sky a blood red. Zhao Heng stood at the boundary between the firelight and the night, dressed in a dark outer robe, his brows somber, yet his expression unusually calm, driven by a nearly cold obsession. He looked at me and spoke softly. "Come with me," Mother cried out, rushing forward to pull at him, but was roughly pushed away. The temple of the temple edge struck her temple on the corridor pillar, and blood immediately flowed from the cut. My heart tightened sharply. Almost instinctively taking a step forward, "Hold it." Zhao Heng finally raised his eyes to me, his tone calm as if speaking of something ordinary. "Center Chiu, I don't want to hurt your family. If you obediently come with me tonight, no one will be harmed." The torches hissed, the night wind carried the scent of blood and charred smoke, and I looked at Zhao Heng, suddenly understanding he wasn't here to coerce me as a hostage, nor merely to take revenge. He wanted me to watch with my own eyes how he would step onto the dragon throne, how he would trample underfoot the last thing that could tie me to this world, so that I would have no choice but to turn back and become his empress, just like in the previous life, he forced Honga to walk a dead end. I closed my eyes, then slowly spoke. "Very well, I will go with you." Zhao Heng looked at me, finally showing a hint of nearly gentle emotion. "That's right." He reached out to take my hand, and I did not avoid him. It was in that moment of contact, as our palms touched, as if I had brushed against a snake. 20. Zhao Heng led me to the Chengming Gate. The lights were blazing, armor stood densely beneath the crimson steps, and palace guards and eunuchs were nowhere to be seen. He really had reached this place. Zhao Heng pulled me and he climbed the imperial steps step by step, his eyes nearly bright with light. "Look, I said it before, I will not lose." I stood beside him, looking down at the dark crowd. In the last life, Honga died outside the Chengming Gate. In this life Zhao Heng still stands here. People are the same, arrogant and stubborn, thinking that as long as he becomes emperor, he can clench all that was lost back into his hands. Zhao Heng turned his head to me, his voice slowly softening. "Center Chiu, I know you hate the Yarrow family, hate that I favored the Yarrow clan, hate that I later betrayed you. But this life is different. The Yarrow family has fallen, and no one will block your sight in the future. You are still my empress. I will send away the harem for you. You will bear me sons and daughters. Descendants will be endless. We will start anew." "Okay." He spoke these words with his eyes fixed on me. I suddenly smiled. Zhao Heng was startled. "What are you smiling at?" I slowly raised my gaze. The hall's candles burned bright, illuminating every detail of his brow and eyes, even making his face look startlingly pale. "If your Majesty wants to recall the past life, do you know what Honga told me before she died?" Zhao Heng's face changed slightly. I looked at him, word by word slowly. "He said that in the next life he would not enter the royal family, only wished to be a pair with mother as ordinary mother and son." Zhao Heng's flushed color instantly faded away. Tears slowly gathered in my eyes, but my voice remained calm. "So, Your Highness, do you think I have any reason to marry you again?" The hall fell silent to a terrifying degree. Zhao Heng stared at me. Finally this last shred of self-deception and pretended restraint was torn away. "In the last life, he used Honga's life, trampled on Center family's blood, trampled on my 20 years of true heart, and finally sat firmly on that dragon throne. In this life, he still fantasizes. As long as there is no Yarrow family, as long as there are no favored consorts, I can forget the boy who died in front of Chengming Gate, forget how I held that cold corpse beneath the high platform, listening to the edict of the deposed queen. Impossible. Some roads, once you walk them, there is no turning back." Zhao Heng's fingers slowly clenched, the joints turning bluish. At that moment, urgent footsteps suddenly sounded outside the hall. The guard staggered in, covered in blood, kneeling on the floor. "Your Highness, something's wrong. Changhua Gate's guard forces have revolted. Shu Jie has taken the imperial order to move troops into the palace. Our side's forces have collapsed by more than half." Before he finished speaking, Zhao Heng kicked him over waist, he roared, chest heaving violently. The last shred of composure that had barely held on in his eyes finally shattered. The hall's flames flickered, the war cries grew louder and nearer, the battle fell like a mountain collapse in the last life when Honga rose up. It was the same scene like this. I stood still, quietly watching him, and suddenly found this scene before me utterly ridiculous. In the turn of reincarnation, he himself tasted this bitterness. Zhao Heng spun around suddenly and gripped my wrist. Come with me. I didn't move. Where else do your Majesty intend to go? He looked at me, his gaze dark and nearly terrifying. Leave the palace, leave the capital, anywhere is fine. As long as I am alive, there will come a day of revenge. Center Chiu, I will take you away. His words were unfinished, the armored clatter resounded, and the flames suddenly flared. Xu Jie stood not far away, the wind rolled with blood-charged air, rattling his robes as they flapped. He gazed at Zhao Heng, his eyes calm, but his voice grew colder. Let her go. 21. Zhao Heng did not let go. He yanked me forward sharply, the other hand drawing a long sword and pressing the blade against the side of my neck. The Imperial guards halted at once, the flames in the hall flickered, casting a chilling gleam over that sword. Xu Jie stood at the foot of the steps, his stride indeed coming to a stop. Zhao Heng let out a low chuckle. Lord Xu arrived quite quickly. His voice was hoarse, yet still carried a touch of almost triumphant madness. Do you dare take another step forward? Xu Jie looked at me, emotions buried deep in his eyes, though his face remained calm. You're already at a dead end. He spoke slowly. Why drag innocent people to die with you? Innocent? Zhao Heng suddenly laughed, but the amusement was so thin it verged on sharpness. She is mine. Her life was always meant to be entangled with mine. How can she be called innocent? Xu Jie only looked at me, his voice gentle. Your Majesty, do not be afraid. The firelight illuminated Xu Jie's face. That normally upright and composed expression showed not a trace of agitation now. He stood there, simply looking at me, his gaze so calm it was almost gentle. The redness in Zhao Heng's eyes suddenly deepened, and only at this moment did he finally understand. I see, he spoke in a low voice, as if he were laughing, yet also as if he were slowly biting out the words between his teeth. I've been wondering, in this lifetime, Minister Xu, why did you come so quickly, and interfere so deeply? The exam fraud, the Yarrow family's downfall, the palace coup and troop deployments. He looked at Xu Jie, a chilling smile in his eyes. Every single thing, as if you had known this day would come. A terrifying chill stirred in Zhao Heng's eyes. You remember too, don't you, when this voice fell? Although the people in the hall did not grasp its deeper meaning, they could not help but feel a sudden wave of cold. Xu Jie looked at Zhao Heng, but that glance was too calm, so calm it felt like tacit consent. Zhao Heng's chest heaved suddenly. Good, truly good, he murmured. I should have understood long ago. In your past life you took a blade for her in Jiangnan, losing a hand. Later, for her sake, you gave up your career and even your life. In this life you are the same. I took you for someone born with the integrity of a loyal minister. But it wasn't that you were unmoved. You had already given your heart to her. My chest jolted. I turned to look at Xu Jie. Zhao Heng laughed even harder. What? Does Lord Xu not dare to admit it? In her previous life she was the Empress, and you were a subject, separated by palace walls, separated by ceremony and rules, separated by the distinction between sovereign and minister. He stared fixedly at Xu Jie, his eyes full of blood-red hatred and mockery. You sure kept it well, so pure and clean that even I was almost deceived. A candle in the hall popped softly. Zhao Heng bowed his head close to me, bringing with him a strong medicinal scent and the tang of blood. Center Chiu, did you hear? In his previous life he actually harbored such a shameful thought toward you. There was a barely contained madness in his tone. I closed my eyes, a sharp pain tearing through my chest. In the next instant, I suddenly raised my hand and clamped down on Zhao Heng's sword-wielding wrist. Zhao Heng probably hadn't expected me to make a move. Caught off guard, his sword veered an inch aside. It was this inch. Zhao Heng let go with a pained curse, yet still tried to grab me. He pulled me so I staggered. When I looked down, I happened to see the long sword that had fallen at my feet. The last time I had picked up a sword was after Honga's death, when I stepped on the blood-softened by rain before Chengming Gate and confronted Zhao Heng on the high platform. What did 20 years of marriage really amount to now? After all the twists, the sword falls back into my sight. I did not hesitate, bending down to pick up the sword. Zhao Heng was forced back 2 steps by Xu Jie, then turned around and saw me standing with the sword in hand, the expression on his face astonished for a moment. Center Qiu, he called to me softly. That is very light, not like a prince, not like an emperor. It was more like the boy from many years ago, who stood under the lamp after the palace banquet dispersed, secretly placing a branch of crabapple into my arms. Unfortunately, that boy had died long ago, dying as he sacrificed me for power, hurt me for others. Knowing Center family was innocent yet still watching my family go to their deaths, the long sword in my hand was held very steady. This sword is to return you to Hong'er, he said as the words fell. I suddenly thrust the sword forward the moment the sword pierced into the flesh. Zhao Heng trembled fiercely as a whole. I lowered my head, looking at the blood slowly spreading over my chest with disbelief. The candles in the hall flickered, casting the blood into a dark, murky hue. He looked up at me, the corners of his lips slowly bleeding. I held the sword and did not retreat. The breath that had been stifled in my chest for years finally escaped inch by inch with this sword. Zhao Heng staggered backward, eventually sinking onto the imperial steps. He leaned against the jade steps that led to the dragon throne, his expression gradually losing clarity, yet his eyes still fixed on me as if he would never understand even in death why in this life everything was evidently different, and why I refused to look back. But he forgot that once a heart has been trampled, it will never live again. Zhao Heng let out a very low, almost sobbing laugh from his throat, like crying, like panting. Center Qiu, he looked at me, the last glimmer in his eyes slowly fading. I truly thought about spending a long time with you. The fire on the imperial steps remained bright, but the surroundings suddenly fell terrifyingly quiet. Those who had been fighting moments ago all stopped, as if no one expected such an ending. The sword in my hand remained unsheathed, its blade stained with blood, dripping drop by drop along the edge onto the golden bricks, making a very faint sound. In this life and the next, I, who hated the person I hated for 2 lifetimes, would finally die at my own hands. Xu Jie stepped forward quickly, seemingly wanting to support me, lifting a hand, but the fingertips paused in midair for a moment, as if afraid to startle me, and in the end he only whispered faintly, "Empress." This sound was very light, the firelight illuminating his refined brows and eyes, and also revealing a shade of deep pain in his eyes. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but my throat felt clogged with a cold, hard lump of blood, and not a single word could be spit out. An unknown breeze blew in from outside the hall, carrying a smell of blood and the charred aftertaste of burning, sweeping through the hall, and the candlelight swayed precariously. That wind was cold, slapping against my face, reminding me of the rain outside the Ming Gate. Later I also thought that if everything could be started over, perhaps it would be different. Now that things truly start over, Hong'er cannot live. The candlelight before me flickered and brightened irregularly, and the voices around gradually grew distant. I felt the sword in my hand growing heavier, the joints of my fingers starting to feel cold. Then everything went dark in front of me, and the last thing that caught me was her embrace carrying a heavy scent of water. I dreamed of my past life again. It was many years after my death. The little palace maid who had once burned paper offerings for me had long since gone grey. Heavy snow fell in swirling sheets. When the wind swept past the Chengming Gate, the snow was lifted and spun in midair, finally drifting down and scattering over a single person's shoulder. The person wore a scarlet official robe, standing beneath the Chengming Gate, thin and straight as bamboo alone in a cold winter. Snow settled on his hair and shoulders and even between his brows and eyes, yet he did not move, only raising his head to gaze at the imposing palace gate, his expression so calm it verged on deathly stillness. I stared at him in a daze. Xu Jie. The instant the sound left my throat, the man in the wind and snow seemed to hear something and tilted his head slightly, but he was not looking at me. His gaze passed through the vast wind and snow and fell deep within the palace walls, toward the Jiaofeng Hall I could never return to. Toward the blood-stained path of the Chengming Gate that I once walked along holding Honga with a lantern, the snow kept falling harder. Someone stood outside the palace gate and loudly read an edict, declaring that the late crown prince was not a rebel, that the case against the Center family would be retried, and that the Yarrow clan had formed factions for personal gain, framed the Eastern Palace, and deceived the sovereign, punishable by death. The proclamation carried far on the wind and snow, each word striking my chest numb. I froze where I stood, almost not daring to believe what I had heard. Xu Jie, standing beneath the Chengming Gate, his robe puffed lightly by the wind, still did not turn. He quietly listened to the long-overdue edict to the end, then raised his hand and took from his sleeve a petition that had been folded neatly. The corners of that petition were worn slightly smooth, as if it had been kept close to the body for many years. He lowered his eyes to read for a moment, then suddenly smiled, so faint a smile it was nearly invisible. The snowy light fell on his face. It was the calm after long suppression, the relief of a long-desired wish fulfilled. I suddenly had a very bad premonition and lunged forward. But my hand passed straight through his sleeve. The wind and snow were so cold my chest trembled. The next moment someone brought a brazier forward, its coals bright, warming the color of the snow for an instant. Xu Jie took the fire stick. The flame leapt up, illuminating his long fingers and that austere face that was almost devoid of passion or desire. Someone shouted, "Lord Xu!" People rushed forward in a panic, as if to stop him, but Xu Jie merely raised his hand. He remained upright, his brows and eyes still calm, as if carrying out something long decided and never to be changed. Beneath the Chengming Gate, the late crown prince was wronged. The entire center household died. No one believed, no one asked, no one restored their innocence. Now that today's edict has been issued and my grievance cleared, I have no further requests, only ask that future generations remember Crown Prince Zhao Hong did not conspire to rebel. The late Empress Center Qiu never lost her virtue. In the end, he threw the memorial into the fire. The flames suddenly leaped up, carrying the papers and burning them rapidly. Then he raised his hand and hurled the burning stick toward his own robe. The crimson official robe was the first to catch fire. The flames climbed up along the hem and cuffs, and in an instant, they overwhelmed him entirely. "Xu Jie!" I pounced forward, shouting hoarsely with all my might, but he could not hear. The flames shot up to the sky, and the entire city in the swirling snow was dyed red with blood. He stood in the fire and yet did not fall. At last, Xu Jie finally slowly raised his head and looked toward the depths of the palace walls. That gaze was distant, quiet, and gentle. In his previous life, he had never married. It was not that he was heartless or lustful, not that his gaze was arrogant, nor that his will was not here, but these can never be spoken aloud. From the moment of parting at Baqiao, he was banished from the capital. I am exhausted to death in the palace. From then on, all my life, we never met again. 23. I jolted awake from a dream. The watch drums outside had already ceased, and inside the house the red candles burned high, wax tears piling up, casting a warm glow over the whole room. I was dazed for a long while before I remembered. Today is the day I marry Xu Jie. The banquet out front hasn't dispersed yet. The matron of honor just helped me remove my hairpins and coronet, and seeing that I was weary, withdrew, saying only that the young lord would return soon. I lowered my head and realized the pillow beside me was already soaked with tears. The wind and snow in my dream were too real, so real that I could scarcely tell what night it was. Scarcely tell whether I was the deposed empress who perished in the deep palace in a past life, or the bride in wedding red in this one. I steadied myself on the bed's edge and rose, wanting to take a deep breath, but as I rounded the screen, I accidentally knocked a small ebony box off the bookshelf. The lid fell open, and its contents scattered across the floor. A letter, folded with utmost neatness, fluttered lightly before my eyes. I bent down to pick it up. The letter paper had already yellowed. A few characters were written at the top, their strokes sharp and upright. Xu Jie's handwriting, Minister Xu Jie. Final words. My fingertips trembled when the letter was unfolded. A very faint scent of old ink wafted up, as if blown from a distant past life all the way into this one. The letter was not long. He said that he was going to Lingnan, that the mountains were long and the waters far, and he supposed he would not return to the capital in this life. He said that after parting at Batxiao, he dared not look back, for he feared that if he did, he would not be able to bring himself to leave. He said that your Majesty has suffered too much confined within the deep palace in this life. If there is truly a next life, he only wished that your Majesty would be far from the Empress household, safe and joyful, find a good person, and grow old together. The last line was heavily inked, as if the hand had trembled when the pen was set down. Your servant Xu Jie, in this life powerless, failed to protect your highness. Deeply ashamed, I stared blankly at that line, and suddenly tears fell. So being demoted out of the capital in his previous life was not the end. The true ending was the malarial reigns of Lingnan, the long, long road, his handling of my burial rites and overturning Hong's case, forcing Zhao Heng to issue an edict, and finally self-immolating beneath the Chengming Gate. And I knew nothing. I only thought our parting at Ba Bridge was merely a final farewell. I lowered my head, tears fell drop by drop onto the letter, slowly blotting out that line of writing. Suddenly, the faintest footsteps sounded outside the door, unhurried and measured, treading along the corridor, yet softening further as they neared the threshold, as though afraid to disturb something. I hadn't yet had time to wipe my tears when the door was gently pushed open. The lamplight flickered. Xu Jie stood in the doorway, still wearing the wedding garments he had not yet changed out of. The bright red suited him well. It did not make him seem frivolous, but rather brought a few notes of warmth to the usually stern, dignified face. He had just slipped away from the banquet earlier. His temple hair was slightly disordered, and there was a faint weariness in his eyes. His gaze first fell on my face, then on the letter in my hand, and his steps paused. He did not speak at once, but instead reached back and gently closed the door. Red candles burned bright, the room hushed and still for a moment. The house was so quiet that only the wind could be heard. I held the letter, my fingers trembling slightly. After a long while, I finally asked softly, "Since you remembered long ago, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Xu Jie looked at me, his gaze deep. "Because the last life was hard enough," he said. "I don't want to keep brandishing those sufferings to make your highness believe me." I stared at him, dazed. In that moment, I suddenly felt that across 2 lifetimes, only today have I truly seen this person before me. His integrity is not merely that of an upright official. Even in loving someone, be upright and proper, refuse to exploit circumstances, refuse to coerce. Even if I had already waited 2 lifetimes, I'd still rather wait a little longer, even slower, wait until I myself walk out of that deadlock, wait until I myself turn around and see him. I lowered my head, slowly put that letter away, and returned it to the box. After a long while, I finally looked up at him. "Xu Jie," he responded with a salute. "I am here, my lord." My eyes still brimmed with tears, but my voice was soft. "In this life, never abandon I am alone." Xu Jie was stunned. The usual restraint in his eyes finally cracked a little. Like ice slowly thawing under spring water, he came closer, half crouched, and lifted his head, looking at me. "Not anymore. I shall stay with the Empress in this life as well." The night outside grows deeper, and the courtyard bathes in moonlight like water. The wind passes under the eaves, blowing the red ribbons gently to and fro, as if a dream that has been delayed for 2 lifetimes, finally settled into reality. And this time, after the dream wakes, no longer the palace cold wind and snow, no longer the bloody ground outside Chengming Gate, nor the silent farewell at the long pavilions of Batxiao Bridge. It is the lights, it is the red candles. From then on, year after year, until old age, we return together.